Hi, this is John, and today we're going to replace a front wheel bearing in this car here, which is a 2001 Honda Civic. And the trick today is going to be to try and use a new special tool that I got to not have to pull the steering knuckle out of the car and press the bearing out. Here's this new special tool I ordered, and we should be able to use that to press the bearing out of the steering knuckle without taking it out of the car. You've probably seen a lot of videos on YouTube right now that show a hydraulic press being used, but the problem with that is you got to pull the steering knuckle out of the car, and that takes extra time. So I'm thinking this tool is going to allow us to do that, but we'll see. So here's the car, and it basically makes a loud noise when you're driving. I'll show you a clip of that in a minute, but I'm pretty sure it's the right front because we got to know which one we're going to pull. And the reason is because when I jacked it up on either side and rotate the tire, you can just feel it in the tire that you've got something that's not quite right as you're rotating. You can kind of feel the vibration as you're turning the tire. So that's why we think it's the right front. Okay, so here we are in the car, and we're going to accelerate through the speed so you can hear what this wheel bearing noise sounds like. So here we go. Keep an eye on the speedometer. There's 25, 30, there's 40, there's 45, there's 50, and there's 60. So you hear it's pretty loud. Okay. So the first step was to get the nut off here. You can see it's off. It was a little tough. Ended up using this simple torch here. Heated quite a bit around the nut. Then I used this breaker bar here along with this bar here and was able to pop it off. Just left the car in park just with this one wheel up, and that seemed like that worked all right. The heat was definitely necessary. Without the heat, I tried getting on that originally without any heat, and there was just no way that was going to come off. It was bending this breaker bar pretty good. So, but with the heat, it was able to break free. So the next step is we're going to take the rotor off of here. We've got to get these two screws off, and I'm going to use one of these impact driver kind of things here to pull those screws. So the next step was to pull the brake caliper off. You can see here I've tied it up to the spring, keep the hose from being pulled, and then the rotor, that was actually easier than I expected to get off. So the next step will be to pull the axle out of there and see if we can get the hub off. So I've turned the wheel all the way one way to try to get this out, and you can see it's loose, but we just aren't able to pull this all the way out. I've actually gotten it off the splines, you can see here, but there's just not enough room to get that out. So I'm thinking maybe if I take the tie rod end off, it'll allow me to rotate the whole steering knuckle just enough to pull this out. So we'll see if that works. Well, the answer was somewhat disappointing. So I got the steering tie rod end off, and even with the rotating this more, it still would not allow pulling the axle out. So I think we're going to have to resort to taking the ball joint off here, which then allows the bottom of the steering knuckle to kind of come out this way and hopefully give us enough clearance to get the drive axle out. So by rotating a little bit more, I thought I had some room to pull it out, but still you couldn't rotate it far enough to really get it in this direction. So next step is we're going to pull this guy off. So to get the ball joint out, I ended up getting the nut off, turning it around backwards, so the castellated part is near the bottom. You can see in there, and then I used this sort of a ball joint puller here to pull the thing off, and so that got it loose. This is what I mean about putting that castellated nut on backwards. It just gives you more of a surface down here to press on, and I actually used a steel block here between that and the shaft here that you turn when you use the press. So we got that loose. Hopefully when we pull that off, we'll have enough room to get the axle out. So once you get that castellated nut out, the problem is this arm, this lower arm, would really like to push up because of these rubber bushings. You know, they're kind of put in there when it's flat, and it would like to come up. Since the car is jacked up, it doesn't really let you do that because the wheel's all the way down. Now I did jack the other side up, you know, so that the sway bar here isn't pushing down on the on this, making it harder, or pushing up, I guess it would be. But still, you can't get it out. So what I ended up doing was using this wrench here. If you can see how I put it on here, and see, using this wrench, I can lever that down enough to free, you can see it there, the free that, allow it to pop out. So with this lower ball joint free, you can see the axle is easily pulled out. There's plenty of clearance in there. So now here's our hub, and listen. So that's the bad wheel bearing. So our next step is to actually get the wheel bearing out, and the hope here is that tool I showed you earlier can actually be used to get this out of the car without breaking these two bolts open, because this is how the camber gets set, is by loosening these bolts. And so we don't want to do a two-wheel alignment if we can avoid that. So leaving these tight allows us to put it all back together without doing an alignment. And sometimes these can also affect the toe, which of course we're not changing that once we put this back in. So next step is to get our tool out and try to pull the actual pull the hub off and then get the wheel bearing out. So my plan was to pull the hub here using a puller arrangement, where I was going to pull on the back of the casting here using this puller here. But the problem was I don't really have anything I can grab onto, partly because this shield is still on and you really can't get to those screws here until you get that off, and then maybe you could get to that. So I'm kind of back to the conclusion of I'm going to have to go ahead and take those two bolts off. I've already got the ABS sensor out. You can see that. Luckily that was able to come out pretty good. I've been using on all these rusty bolts this PB Blaster stuff. That seems like that helps a lot in terms of getting old rusty bolts off. So it looks like I'm going to have to probably take these two bolts off and put this in a hydraulic press to get that hub out of there. Okay, so the steering knuckle is out, as you can see here. There it is sitting on the ground. So we're going to have to use the hydraulic press to get that hub out of there. But here's something not to do. I ended up having to take the half shaft out here. I ended up letting this shaft come too far out, and I couldn't get it back in here. So I had to use a little pry bar and pop this out of the transmission. As you can see there, there's where it is, where the hole in the transmission is. That's where it goes. I had to pop this out, had to take this little clamp off, and found that it's full of, looks like gear oil, and as you can see, that should not have come off. You can see some little roller bearings in there. I was able to get it shoved back together once I got it out of the car, but don't let it come too far out as you're working in this area here. Just keep that axle kind of shoved back in there, otherwise you may have to do what I had to do here. Okay, so here's what this looks like. You can see there's three kind of roller bearings in here. They actually move. I thought they were going to fall off, but they are self-contained on here. But there's three of those, and inside here you can see this is what the inside of that race looks like. It actually looks pretty good, so I think I'm going to put this back together and just put some gear oil back in there, and hopefully that will keep running for quite a few more miles. So here's the way I'm trying to get the hub out. You can see I've got that jaw almost on there. This one's underneath where the, see right here, where the ABS sensor came out. But it wasn't real obvious how to support this to get the, to use the hydraulic press to press the hub out. So I'm going to give this a try and see if this will press it out. Okay, I finally figured out how to get this out of here. The solution was really hitting it pretty darn good with a hammer, and I had something that had to fit that hub real well, at least to get it started like that. So I could get a really good hit on that, and it started to loosen it. And then once I did that, then I had something else. This is just like a weight, from an old set of weights, a collar, and then I was able to use it, hit that out, and you can see that it takes the that inner race out with it, leaving the other race there. But there was really no good way to support that while pressing, so I think a sledgehammer, probably the best way to get that out of there. So the next step is to try and get this retaining ring out, really corroded and rusty in there. So going after it with the old wire brush and maybe a little screwdriver to try and do a little scraping in there, and some of this PB blaster, and we'll see if we can get that ring out of there. Okay, so we got the snap ring, or the retaining ring here, out, and I did a little scraping around here. You can see it's pretty rusty, but that is the joint then that's going to have to separate when we start pulling on this thing with that puller tool. So I'm going to go ahead and try and do this without using the hydraulic press and use that tool that I got to pull the bearing out. So I've got the tool installed here. You can see the cup side over there. That's the side where we took the snap ring out. And then on this side here, we've got this disc that it was the biggest one that would fit inside that casting there. And then we've got, it comes with a bearing and some washers. I've got those in there. And then I've got this hand tight. So I'm going to start tightening this down, and hopefully that bearing starts pulling out, pushing out the other side. Well, after some cranking on that with this opening wrench here, we've got the bearing out. It's in this stack here. This tool worked pretty well. One of the key things here was certainly the size of the shaft helped. Pretty big. You could really crank on it, but also this bearing in here, which allowed this stack to spin as you're tightening. So that really helped a lot too. And then here we see the bearing, which was pulled out finally. So now we're ready. So I've cleaned up the inner surface here, just a little bit of emery paper, and scraped this ring out here. Basically the ridge where the ring's going to go to hold the bearing in. And we've got our brand new bearing. This is a Timken, supposedly, although it's funny, it says Japan and Koyo on it, but the box says Timken. So anyways, now there's two sides. You can see this has got kind of the rubber side here. This is more of a metal seal here. And if you look at the one that came out, the metal seal here is the side that was in first. And then the other side, the rubber side, is the side that we pulled out with the hub. So this is going to go in like this. So I'm going to set up the press again, back the other way this time, to push this in. And we're going to want to push on the outer race here, not on the inner race, as we drive the bearing in. Okay, so I've assembled this tool in such a way to push this bearing back in. So here's the bearing, and here's the one that I found that's kind of just a collar that's it's just the right size to contact only the outer race. So this is just a collar here, and then this is the piece that fits in the end of it. And then on the other side, I just found a collar that fit right into the casting there. Just put an end piece on it, there's the bearing, and there's the nut. So, and I put just a little bit of light oil on this. So now I'll start cranking that together, and hopefully it goes right in. Okay, so it's all the way in. The key is really to make sure that you really get it all the way in. So you can't really see this when you're doing it, but you need to make sure that that outer race is all the way in, so that you've got this ridge available then for the retaining ring. So I really had, actually I stopped, thought I was done, opened it up a little bit, saw in there that I couldn't quite get it in, and I had to really crank on it pretty good to get it all the way in there. But then when you just really couldn't crank it anymore, you knew it was all the way in. So next step is to put the retaining ring in, and then we'll put a new hub back on there. Okay, here's the setup I've put together to get the hub back on to the new bearing. So on this side, where we're pushing against the bearing, we want to be pushing on the inner race. So you can see in there where we've got a disc selected to just touch the inner race. We don't really want to push against the casting here, which is holding the outer race. And so on this side you can see we've got the hub just started in there, and I've just put a disc on this side to basically contact the center part of that hub there. And then on here I've got a spacer just to push us out so it's easier to get the wrench on here, and of course we got the bearing in there. So I'm going to start cranking and pulling this hub into the inner race of the bearing. Okay, so you can see now the hub is back in, and now this has been pulled in. The hub, which is the inner part, has been pulled in as far as it can go relative to this inner race here. And you know, if it's not all the way in there, I'm not sure if that's 100% critical, because when you tighten up the front bolt there, the back end of the axle is going to be pushing right up against here too. So that could potentially pull it all the way if there's some issue with it not being in. But I think here we got it all the way in. So the next step is now to take this assembly and put it back in the car. So the car's all back together, and the test drive shows the noise is gone, so it was definitely the wheel bearing. In terms of the alignment, the camber, you know, basically top of the wheel in and out, there was very little play in the bolts there, so it could be that it's off by maybe a couple tenths of a degree, but in terms of the way it drove, it seemed like it was fine. So I'm not going to worry about the alignment unless we see some kind of tread wear, but there's certainly no pulling due to any kind of camber change. It's just kind of sighting on the wheels. They look like they're pretty close. So success. If you're interested in what's that bearing look like, I was a little worried when I got it apart, because once I cleaned it up, this race looks pristine here, and the balls actually on that side looked pretty good. So after I got it all done, I decided to look at the race on the other side, and you can see here, this is perfect here, but then look at this, there's a lot of galling here, all the way around here, and then a little bit right here too. So this bearing was definitely bad, even though the one side looked pretty good, but you can just even see by the color of the balls in there. They're kind of shiny on this side, and here they're kind of dark, that this side had definitely failed. You can even see a piece of the race cracked off right there. So otherwise the job was good. I don't think there's really a good way to do this without actually pulling the steering knuckle out of the car. So even though that tool came in handy, it didn't eliminate the need to pull it out, at least in the Honda Civic. Thanks for watching.